Good afternoon. Greetings from the U.S. Consulate here in Perth. My name is Matt Hafner. I'm the Consular officer here at our consulate in Perth. I really appreciate everyone who's joining today. This is kind of our first attempt at doing virtual presentations with a live audience. So I appreciate your patience as we kind of go through this on our first try. I've been now a consular officer here in Western Australia for about 8 months. I've been in the State Department coming up on 9 years, having processed visas in 8 different countries on 4 different continents. So I hope today I can provide you with the information you're looking for about E3 visas for Australians looking to work in the United States, try to tell you what E3 visas are, tell you about some of the requirements, let you know some important information so you're well prepared if you plan to work in the future in the United States. I'm fully aware that right now there's a global pandemic. Travel may not be the first thing on everyone's mind going forward, but I just wanted to share this information with you as you think about kind of that post-pandemic work life, maybe a future career to gain some skills from your job in the United States you can bring back to Australia, and hopefully give you some information to help clear up any misconceptions about what E3 visas are, and provide you with some more information on how you can apply and what's required going forward. I've received a few questions in advance that I'm going to answer at the end of my presentation. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in the chat box and I'll try to answer them at the end. Please know that I'm not able to answer specific questions about specific visa applications. I'm trying to stick to general requirements, and I'll give you some email addresses later where you can address some kind of specific questions you have. First and foremost, thank you again for joining this presentation today, and let's get to it. So E3 visas are kind of an enduring sign of the partnership between Australia and the United States. It shows our alliance in action. E3 visas are a way for Australians to work in the United States, gain some professional experience with US companies. They're open to Australian citizens that have university degrees and are going into specialty occupations. So I'm going to move forward in my slides here. So what are the requirements to qualify for an E3 visa? First and foremost, you have to be an Australian citizen. The name of this visa is Specialty Occupation Workers for Australians. There's a little bit of misconceptions or misinformation about there that Australians aren't able to apply, or it's for other nationalities as well. It is only for Australians, and it is by US law. And you have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree or its equivalent. I'll talk a little bit more detail about this later and how experience can replace bachelor's degree in certain situations. You have to have a job offer from a US employer. This is, you have to have a job in advance. It's not used to go find work in the United States. You have to have already a job lined up. And you have to demonstrate that your proposed stay in the United States will be temporary. So this means that this visa isn't a path to immigration per se, but it does allow you to work temporarily in the United States fully legally. Now, these visas can be renewed, and there's no cap on the number of times you can renew. So don't think of it as you can only work for 2 years. You can, if you continue your same employment, you can continue to renew your visa. Okay. Once again, just a reminder that this is for Australian citizens. If your family members joining you are not Australian citizens, they can still qualify as your dependents. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about what a specialty occupation is. These are a little bit technical terms, and if I'm using too much jargon, please throw in a question in the chat and I'll try to answer it later. but a specialty occupation basically requires a university level degree or greater. It's the theoretical and practical application of a body of specialized knowledge. So this is basically the same requirements of an H-1B visa, which is a temporary worker visa as well. Under US regulations, the definition of specialty occupation is the same for E3s and H-1Bs. H-1Bs are probably a little bit more well-known around the world because they're the specialty worker visas available. There are some key similarities and key differences though between H-1Bs. So an E3 and an H-1B both require tertiary educational qualifications, such as a college degree. They both have the same definition of specialty occupation. Both require a US employer to sponsor, and both require the employer to file a labor condition application, which I'm going to call an LCA going forward, with the US Department of Labor. And the Department of Labor will certify that it's a specialty occupation and that it meets certain wage and income requirements. These are requirements for the employee. It's not the visa applicant who will prepare the LCA, it will be the employer. So those parts are similar. What's different about H-1Bs and E3s is H-1Bs are open to any nationality, whereas E3s are specific to Australia. I keep saying this over and over again, that it's specific to Australia. Another key difference between an E3 and an H-1B is, while there are caps on the number of E3s every year, the H-1Bs are subject to a lottery. There's more H-1B applications every year than are allowed per the annual caps. So getting an H-1B is very difficult. While E3s have numerical caps, numerical limits every year, we've never come close to meeting those caps. So the likelihood of running into a cap problem with an E3 is very limited. H-1Bs have a time limit of how long you can work on an H-1B in the United States. That's 5 years, and then you have to go overseas for a year, restart your clock, and then apply for another one. Whereas an E3 does not have limits on the number of years you can have an E3. So you can continue to renew your E3 up to indefinitely. For spouses, E3 spouses are allowed to work, or are allowed to receive work authorization if they apply to the Department of Homeland Security and receive the necessary approvals. H-1Bs, the limitations on spousal work can change from time to time. So just know that E3 spouses are able to work. Okay, so we've talked about what a specialty occupation is. Now we'll talk about the next requirement, is that you have to have a job offer. So as you prepare your application, you'll have a job offer letter from your employer. This letter will explain what you do. It will provide your information on your income, proposed salary, where you'll work, talking a little bit detail about your employment. What's important to note here is that E3 visas are for specialty workers going to work in the United States. They're not for entrepreneurs. You can't apply for an E3 to give yourself a job in the United States. So you're going to look for a job with a company. If you're thinking about being an entrepreneur or investing in the United States, there are other visa categories that might be more appropriate, including the E2 visa, which is for investors. That is a treaty-based visa, and there's a treaty between Australia and the United States there. So if you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, the E3 might not be the correct route for you. You'll have a copy of your labor condition application and LCA. This is a similar process for H-1Bs. This is not something you have to prepare yourself. Your employer will take care of this for you. I know this is a little bit complicated and there's a little bit of jargon, but once you've secured that employment in the United States, your employer will provide that job letter, and they will do the necessary steps with the Department of Labor to get the labor condition application. And then, because it requires a specialty occupation, you bring in a copy of your degree or any special licenses to do the job. For example, if it's an aviation related field and you need a pilot's license and the job requires one, you'd have to come and bring that or show how you plan to get one within arriving in the United States. For folks without college, university level degrees, if it's a specialty occupation that they have experience in, generally it's 3 years of experience required for every 1 year of college. So you're looking at a 3-to-1 ratio for that there. Okay, so some important things to note. I mentioned earlier that there's a numerical cap on E3s issued every year. There's 10,500 we can issue in a given fiscal year. In 2019, we only issued 5,800 of these visas. So we're well below the cap. And those additional visas don't go to another country. They're reserved specifically and only for Australians. So it's basically that they're just being unused. Renewals do not count against this cap every year. So if you continue working for the same company and you're renewing your visa, that won't count against the annual cap. If you had been working in the United States on an E3 visa, but you've changed companies, when you reapply, you'll have to get another E3 visa, not an E3 renewal, because you're starting a new employment and we just need to verify that it meets all the legal requirements. So those, in that situation, it would count against the cap, but as I said, we don't get that close to reaching the annual cap. You can apply for these visas anywhere in the world. I would strongly suggest that you especially apply for that first-time application here in Australia. We would be the subject matter experts on handling Australian visa applications. During this COVID period, different embassies and consulates have different abilities to process cases right now. So it may be that you're not able to apply for that first-time visa in a certain country because they just don't have the capacity for handling these applications right now. Because with COVID, we want to make sure that our staff, their health and safety is being taken care of. So if you can, it's really best to apply that first time here in Australia, though it's not required. If you're someone who's in the United States currently, say you're finishing up a J1 program and you need to switch to an E3 in the United States, USCIS recently announced that premium processing for these change of status is now available for E3. So if you look at their website, uscis.gov, you might get some more information there. As I mentioned earlier on the second point, this is not a path to immigration. It's not a green card. It's ideally for a temporary period of work. And I realize temporary can have different definitions. Temporary might be 2 years, it might be 4, it might be 8, depending on the job you have in the United States. But you can continue to renew your visa. And your spouse and children, of course, can accompany you. They don't have to be Australian nationality. So we'll move to the next slide. If you come to any of our in-person presentations or event, we hand out these nifty little explanation sheets of what an E3 visa is. So if we, in WA, if we are visiting a high school or university, we leave these with you. But just to reiterate, the E3 visa is a partnership between Australia and the United States. It is a visa that allows Australians to work in specialty occupations in the United States. To qualify, you have to meet a few minimum requirements. You have to apply for go to work in a job that is a specialty occupation, generally meaning a college degree. You have to provide your job offer letter and your labor condition application, your LCH, your visa application. And if you have your copy of your university degree, any licenses, go ahead and bring that with us. So we have 3 consulates that process visas here in Australia. You can apply for a visa here in Perth, in Sydney, or in Melbourne. Generally, people in Queensland, the ACT, and New South Wales would apply in Sydney. Folks in Tasmania, Victoria, South Australia, and NT would apply in Melbourne, and then Western Australians would apply here in Perth. With the various evolving fluid border restrictions here in Australia. You're welcome to apply here in Perth, assuming you don't need a quarantine. If you do need a quarantine, we just ask that you finish that quarantine in advance to make sure you're all safe and ready to visit us at the consulate. We have all of this information available. Please look at our website, au.usembassy.gov. And then when you come to apply for a visa, you're going to look at ustraveldocs.com.au. You can write to us at perthvisas@state.gov if you have questions specific to your case. We'll try to get you a response as quickly as possible. Please do continue to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. As with this COVID time and the various changes in US visa rules and regulations, especially entry restrictions based on certain geographic areas, I really would suggest you continue to follow travel.state.gov and follow Consular Affairs on Facebook and Twitter to get the most up-to-date information on all those changes. I appreciate your patience as I've gone through here. I did receive a few questions in advance, and I will go through those really quickly before I take any open questions on the chat or from people attending. The first question I received was about requiring a degree. So generally, this is a specialty occupation visa, so a college degree would be required. There are certain circumstances, however, where experience can replace a college degree. So we're looking at a 3 years of experience to equal 1 year of a degree. The next question I got, is there any burden of cost on the employer if they decide to offer you employment rather than someone with already credentialed working rights? So the first step your employer would have to do after offering you the job is file the labor condition application with the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor then certifies whether that meets the requirements in order to have a foreign worker come, non-US citizen worker come on a non-immigrant visa. So the next question, this visa requires an offer of employment, but it's very difficult to offer clarity without your right to work. So as I mentioned earlier, this visa is not necessarily designed for entrepreneurs, but rather for Australian citizens to go engage in specialty occupation in the United States. So you'd have to have a job lined up before you apply for your visa. And in that process of discussing with your employer, this might be a conversation you have directly with them. You know, they may not be aware of, you may be their best candidate, but they're not familiar with E3s. Maybe something you can talk to them about, say, hey, there's this special visa for Australians. And then through their immigration lawyers, most large companies will have engaged some kind of law firm, and they can work together on getting the necessary requirements so that you can apply for your visa. Is there any limit on positions other than require a bachelor degree? As I've said before, it does require that it be a specialty occupation. It couldn't be for a job that doesn't require any kind of specialty knowledge. So if it were a non-management or very basic, say like working, it's not summer work and travel. It requires a specialty occupation. So for Australian citizens, however, summer work and travel might be a different option for people who aren't necessarily going to do specialty occupations. What I forgot to mention, which I wrote big in my notes, but I forgot to say is there's no age limit as well. It's not summer work and travel. It can be for applicants of any age who have a college degree. So you're looking at someone probably from the age of 20 and above, but there's no upper limit on the age. Moving on to the next question I got. Can we apply for the visa now during COVID times, and will they accept applications, or do we have to wait for the borders to open? So if you have received employment from a US company, you are able to apply for a visa right now here in Australia. We certainly have plenty of availability here in Perth for appointments. You don't have to wait. We're not contingent on applying for a visa. From our perspective, we're not contingent on you being able to depart Australia. So yes, you can apply if you have a job. We've always considered E3 applications to be mission critical activities here for Australia. So please, if you have a job offer for an E3, please feel welcome to apply. And if we apply, how long does the process take when we get approved successful? So in Perth, at least, we can process visas fairly quickly. If you apply on a Monday, depending on how long it takes to mail back your visa, you'll probably have it back by the end of that week, if not early the next week. Of course, that depends on conditions and various processing requirements. If there was another quick lockdown, that might affect our ability to get it back quickly, but we try to get it back to you as soon as possible. But in general, the process in the majority of the cases is fairly quick. Do we have to have proof of employment before applying for E3, or can we apply without having employment secure? Yes, you do have to have employment secure before you do apply for your E3 visa. It's one of the requirements that you already have a job lined up. If you're looking for summer work and travel, that might be if you don't have something lined up for Australians because they can stay for 12 months, pending restrictions on current presidential proclamations and J1 issuances. That might be a route to look at. Where would we look for jobs that accept foreigners? As many places I have looked do not sponsor international workers for a visa. I can't really give guidance on where to apply for a job or how to look for a job. This is where I would kind of rely on your ingenuity and your job search to find a job that fits your skills and company needs in the United States. As I've mentioned before, in any given fiscal year, over 5,000 Australians qualify for these kind of visas. So there are opportunities, I think, in the United States for Australians, especially those with special skills, to work in the US. So I would just say good luck in your search. You know, hopefully as the COVID situation changes, as the economic conditions improve in Australia and the United States over the next coming months, hopefully there's more opportunities. One advantage Australians do have is because H-1Bs are so competitive and so hard to get, that an E3 is an option that can help your competitive advantage with a company as you're applying. So those were the questions I received in advance. And I'm going to try to see at least one question. Someone wrote a nice comment, thank you, in the chat box. If you have any questions, I will try to answer them. If you're able to raise your hand, I will see if we can call on you as well. Sorry, let me go to the first question here. Apologies for the tech slowness. What is the average timeline to receive an E3 visa after submission request? So generally, you'll have it back within 10 business days, if not sooner. There are certain reasons why processing might be delayed in individual cases, but for the vast majority of applicants, you're looking to get your visa back within 2 weeks if you qualify. Next question here. Do you know how extensive, difficult the labor conditions applications are? I know sometimes the bureaucracy of sponsoring an overseas national can put companies off hiring them. Can you give some examples of specialty occupations in the past? So because the labor condition application is a process that's done with the Department of Labor, I don't know exactly how difficult these are to process. I think if you look at the Department of Labor website, you can get an idea of what's required. They generally ask, you know, they want to know where exactly you're going to be working, that you're going to be paid at least, if not higher than the prevailing wages, what kind of job you're going to be doing, so it meets the conditions of what a specialty occupation is. So I would look through that. So examples of specialty occupations that I've seen so far. Of course, this is not exhaustive or limited in any way. Many folks doing IT-related computer programming, people who design and develop software, managers, whether they be marketing, accounting, several people I've seen in the legal profession. Now, I'm a little bit new to Australia, so I don't have as much depth as that. But there's a wide range of what a specialty occupation is. Hope that answers that question. There's a question here that's a little bit more specific to an individual's circumstances. In that situation, I would recommend you just write to Perth Visas directly about your situation. That might be better for that. And in terms of being hired by a cruise line, it may not be that an E3 is the right visa. It might be as a crew of passenger cruise ship that it's a different visa, possibly a C1D. I can't really give legal advice on which visa you should apply for, but I would suggest really talking to your employer about what might be the best route for you. But if you have a question more about your personal situation, you can write to Perth Visas at state.gov. We may not be able to go into specifics about visa eligibility. We can't decide whether someone is qualified for a visa in advance of an application, but you're welcome to ask any question. We'll try to get you at least directed towards the right information. I think I've captured the questions that are currently in the chat box. Let me see if I can see if there's anything. If there's any other questions, please feel free to type them in there. Happy to wait a couple more minutes, or if you have any, if you want to raise your hand and speak on the phone, of course, you're welcome to, but I'll wait another couple minutes or two to see if you have any further questions. Once again, I want to direct you all to our available information. We try not to, oh, we have someone who raised their hand. Let me see if I can fix.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Great, nice to talk to you. Yeah, so for the E3, is it only for IT people or people in those kind of industries, or like sort of professional industries like that, or would it also apply to someone who is in entertainment like me?
So that's a good question. I don't know if I'm going to give you as clear answer as you hope, because it's kind of a broad category. So E3s really, it would involve a specialty application or a specialty occupation, generally a job that requires a college level degree. Now, if people, by entertainment, I know that can be a very broad category, from acting to painting to production design, video editing, all of these kind of various jobs that are required to put together entertainment. Some of those may be specialty occupations. It's really up to the Department of Labor to make that initial determination. But there are certain visa categories for entertainers, such as O or P visas. P visas will generally require a sponsor in the United States, whereas an O visa you can self-petition if you are an entertainer of extraordinary ability. But in E3, it really depends. Does the job require a college degree? And there's certainly fields within the entertainment business that definitely would. That's really a determination.
I recently actually made a short film with some friends in New York, actually, and then we made a team, and we've made a proof of concept. So it was all US crew, and we've just recently produced it, and we have an investor now. So it would be great if I was able to go there and start the feature as well. So that's another thing that I would think about applying for this visa for. That's why I have so many questions regarding my status.
Gotcha. Well, some of these questions, it might be best to write to us directly, because I can't really talk about individual circumstances. If you send us an email at perthvisas@state.gov. And then if you haven't, you may want to think about talking to immigration lawyer or immigration specialist. They can really, since I can't give advice on what visa to apply for, that might be an option to talk about, maybe if you want to pursue this film opportunity going forward.
Okay. All right then. Thanks.
say last call for any questions.
Hi, Matt. Can I jump on?
Oh, yes.
Can you hear me all right? Yeah,
I can hear you.
perfect. Great. I just had a quick question. I was just wondering, in regards to the bachelor's degree requirement, does that have to be completed before you apply, or could you be in your last semester or last year about to finish it with an employer sponsoring you, and could you still apply if you're almost finished it?
In this circumstance, because a specialty occupation generally requires a bachelor's degree, it's probably best to finish that before you apply.
Okay, no worries, thanks.
There's a question here on the chat: do they attract higher level roles, management and executive, or is there a likely chance a recent graduate or entry level type roles? So it can be a wide range of roles. It doesn't have to be management or executive. And if a company hires a recent grad, hires an Australian for a recent grad for a position that is a specialty occupation, there's certainly nothing that would stop you from applying for an E3 visa. See someone has their hand raised. Go ahead if they can.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this presentation. I have a question which is a bit more upstream. So I understand that this visa is sort of relatively easy to obtain once you have a job offer, which is great. But upstream in the application process, so I came across like when you go to career websites and apply for a position, and there is always a question, obviously, and they ask, do you have the right to work in the US? And I usually put no, and then I go back in the final comments and then say, yeah, but I am aware there is this visa for Australia and it's very quick to get. But I had the impression that sort of puts me in a different bucket already upstream when I apply, independently from the level of specialization or whatever you put on the table. Thanks. So if there is way to better way to approach this, or what would you suggest?
That's I think a little bit difficult question for me to answer, since it's a little bit outside of the scope of kind of the information I'm providing. It's really kind of a discussion I think you would have with a potential employer about your ability to work in the United States. The great advantage, I think, for Australians is because this E3 visa exists. It makes it much easier for a US company to hire an Australian employee in a specialty occupation than it would be to try to go for an H-1B, because the Australian caps for E3s are never met. So it's probably some information you can give to a potential employer that might help with your own comparative advantage.
All right, thanks. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Well, I want to thank you all for joining my presentation here today. We'll pop it up online so people who may not be or join late could catch some of the information. But thank you all so much, and hope you have a great day. Thank you.